Should you train to failure? Yes, but not all the time. So in today's video, I'll be discussing the nuanced aspect to this topic, giving you the best and most simple guidelines. So, first thing I'll say is that the evidence seems to suggest that going to failure is ideal for hypertrophy. Whether it's at 35 or 75% of your 100 max does not matter. You need to have the right training effort in order to grow. But what's also important to know is that the final reps leading up to that point are still very effective. So if you're supposed to do 3 sets of 10 and you leave 1 rep in reserve, that's probably still going to get you most of the hypertrophy results. So isn't this black and white idea that you need to go maximum balls to the wall intensity? Because there is a flip side to this too. Impaired recovery through additional fatigue accumulation. And that's the dark side of always going to failure, especially on a high volume, high frequency program. If you're really doing it all, failing on every single set, to which if you attempt to do another one, a spotter would have to jump in, you can't tell me that's ideal for your long-term recovery management. You absolutely will require more deloads, and in the context of a strength training program, may not be ideal either. Even though hypertrophy could be the limiting factor, fatigue buildup is going to fuck you up. So to me, I generally like to leave a rep or 2 in reserve for the big compound movements specifically. I don't like leaving 3 to 4. Otherwise, you got to do a lot more sets. So in terms of efficiency, ticking all the right boxes, a rep or 2 is probably fine. And the way you would auto-regulate this is as the sets go on. Only go to failure if you absolutely have to. It should be the last resort in order to hit your target range. So if you're getting 3 sets of 10 and you've been slowly working your way up to 10, 10, 10, and now you got 10, 10, 9, well, on your 3rd set, I would say the 9, go to failure. Get your 3 sets of 10 and then increase the weight by 5 pounds next session. So I view it as a progression strategy. It's your last resort, your trump card, if you will. Not that you're going to fail on the 1st set, then the 2nd, and then the final one, you're going to have to rest even longer just to get it done, because that's another con of this approach. If you're in the 3 to 5 minute rest range, which does seem to be superior for hypertrophy and strength, by the way, you might just find that 100% intensity for all the sets forces you to rest at the higher extremities of those ranges, or even going beyond. So if normally you would rest 3 minutes between sets, now you're creeping up to 5 every single time. And for the last set, you might even be in the 6 to 8 range. So what's happening now? You're wasting your fucking time. Or not really wasting per se. It's less efficient training, and for what? Gains that probably aren't going to make a massive difference long term, especially since there is the recovery aspect to consider. So to me, you don't want to go to absolute failure. Get really damn close to it. Don't train like a get close, but not absolute for all of the sets. And that's the key word that I'm using here. All, every. Because I do believe in training to failure. I do it all the time in my workouts, but I reserve it for the moments that count on the heavy compound movements. So if I did 4 compound movements in a workout, maybe 2 or 3 of those sets were at 100% failure, whereas the others are really close to it. So that's my general approach. Beyond that, I can talk about the isolations very briefly. I think this is one of the few areas where you probably could go to failure on every single set. So I'm not trying to contradict what I previously said, but I did specify compounds. When you're working on just one muscle group, the stimulus to fatigue ratio is already excellent by design. So even if fatigue does creep up a bit, it's minuscule. So if you're doing 40-pound dumbbell curls, so what? That's nothing. So what's common is to give it your all for every set and still be able to reproduce your performance without having to rest excessively. So in this way, the failure isn't compromising your performance during the workout itself. And because the weights are generally so light or a lot less compared to the compounds, from a weekly fatigue standpoint, it's all good. So this is the only area where you can breach the guidelines a bit. In addition, the percentages matter as well, in the sense that the lower you go, the more leeway you have. So let me simplify your life again. If you're in the 3 to 10 rep range, I probably wouldn't fail in every single set. But if you're in the 10 to 20 rep range or even beyond, you probably could go all out, because in this case, it's actually harder to hit failure. So you might undershoot your reps in reserve, which will be problematic for your hypertrophy. Then you're going to start blaming higher reps, even though we know it's effective for gaining mass. That's the first thing. And secondly, it just doesn't beat you down as much. Like if I'm doing 3 sets of 15 to 20 on a bench press, okay, you're going to get a massive pump in your pectorals. But let's keep it real. It won't beat you down the same way a 5x5 would. So if you're doing 5 sets, this is heavy, by the way, you're in the 80 plus range, obviously you can't reproduce that on a frequent basis. And if you look at a lot of effective programs, they tend to include a light day in which you actually are going to failure, because the act itself is not as bad when you're on the lower side of the percentages. So if you truly are a fan of this brutal style of working out, then just up the reps and you should be okay, which explains what we tend to see in the calisthenics world. 4 sets of 25, 3 sets of 33, 3 sets of 15 to 20. The moment you're in those zones, it's not the same. I would even throw in 10 by 10, by the way, because in this case, it's not 10 equivalent sets. You naturally have to do a lower percentage. So the reps in reserve kind of automatically built in. So a little side thing, but important to note regardless. The recovery consequences of hitting failure are definitely less when the intensity isn't as high, which should be common sense for a lot of you. And with that said, not much else for me to say. Like I said, it's a very simple topic. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have additional guidelines you'd like to share. Let's hear it, and I'll talk to you all next time.